Hi, my name is Margarita. I'm going to do my article critique on decreased stress levels in nurses, a benefit of quiet time. So I'm just going to read the questions and then explain my answers to them. So it's asking number one, if the title clearly and accurately represents the article. I do believe that the title accurately represents the article. This describes the study that is going to be tested. So that's number two, is the report well organized? I believe the article is well organized and it's categorized into different sections that include but aren't limited to the procedure, limitations, the results, and the discussion. The abstract describes the purpose of the study, and it describes basically how they plan on implementing the study and the results and conclusion of the study. It does fail to inform the reader of any future recommendations based on results of the study, though. This information should be located within the article. So the objective research hypothesis. The purpose of this study is to determine whether a simple measure, such as turning down the lights to initiate quiet time, affected noise and stress levels of nurses working in the medical surgical ICU unit. That's on page 397. It's located right here by methods. The objective of this research is to determine the effects of turning down the lights on med-surg ICU and how that affects the nurses. It's also known as quiet time, turning down the lights. In theory, this is supposed to decrease the level of noise in the unit as well as the nurses' stress levels. So the target population is going to be the day shift med-surg ICU nurses in the unit who decided to volunteer for this study and participate in this. It's asking if it's adequate. I don't believe personally that it's adequate because they only checked 22 nurses. That's not enough to actually say that's, in my opinion, that's not enough to say that that's a study. You want to study maybe the entire hospital or several hospitals with their med-surg ICU units, not just one hospital and one ICU and one unit that is their ICU unit. So was there a clear inclusion or exclusion criteria? I think the nurses that were included in this study all volunteered to participate. This included the floating ICU nurses, but they had to be ICU. And nurses that were excluded from the study were any type of nurse that were from another department that happened to be working in the ICU at that time. So I think that clearly states who was included and who was excluded. What was the process used to collect the data? So data was collected from each nurse in the study 4 times a day throughout the study. And this survey was completed 30 minutes before quiet time, 30 minutes after quiet time, 1 hour after quiet time, and 2 hours after quiet time. So it's the collection method was clearly stated and easy to follow in the article. Are the results presented clearly in the text? What is the significance of the findings? So the results were clearly presented. It stated that the important finding in our study is that nurses' stress decreased with implementation of quiet time, which consisted of simply turning down the lights. This can be found on page 400. I was asking, is there a discussion at the end of the article? How does this support the hypothesis? The discussion at the end of the article does support the hypothesis, but it's a gray area on how it supports the hypothesis. So the hypothesis was with the lights that were slightly turned down during quiet time would decrease the noise level and the stress of the nurses. What happened is that there was not a huge difference in the noise decrease at first. This happened gradually, but it did cause the nurses' stress levels to decrease dramatically. This decrease happened so dramatically that the nurses implemented the quiet time after the study was over. They thought it really helped them, so of course they decided to keep it. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this article? So some strengths include that it stated certain studies were not included due to unexpected situations, such as not ER, CPR having to occur, any type of a medical emergency that had to occur at that time. Graphs and charts really helped visualize the results for better understanding, and then the content was really clear and concise. And it was categorized into different sections, which I don't always find in an article. It's really helpful. The biggest weakness for me that I saw was the fact that these references, most of them were over 5 years old. This article was written in 2015. The latest reference that should be on there is 2010, but there were ones that were before that. So, what are the limitations of this article, and what's the implementation? Limitations include that they only had day shift nurses. Quiet time was only implicated during day shift from 2 to 4 p.m. And then this was a controlled study because only ICU nurses on one unit were tested at a specific hospital. Not, like I said earlier, more than one hospital and more than one unit. The study was only tested in May to June, which if you work at a hospital in Florida, you know that May to June is considered the off season. Really, it's not this season that is busy for Florida. So you explain how the references cited are appropriate or inappropriate for the article. The majority of the references, like I said, are over 5 years old, and that's at that point considered an unreliable source because it's not appropriate in time frame anymore. And then, do I have any recommendations for future nursing practice or research? I believe that a bigger sampling size would be better. I believe using different units, such as MedTele, which is very busy, would also benefit this study. A larger or different time frame, even like the busy season, such as December to February, and a more efficient way of collecting the data than just because, I mean, you're not going to go up to a nurse when they're busy in the ICU and say, hey, can you answer some questions for me? That's going to take away their time. And then I see quiet time as beneficial to hospitals just because of the fact that even though certain units are busy, they could benefit from quiet time. Like I brought up MedTele before. If you work on a MedTele floor and you happen to get a quiet time from 2 to 4, that's a really busy time for the floor. So that would be perfect for them to have quiet time. They'd be able to actually not enjoy, but have less stress because they're constantly stressed with everything that's going on the floor. There are other units, of course, that could be helpful for it. PACU, med-surg, even orthopedics would be great to have great to have quiet time in it. So that is my critique. I hope you enjoyed this video.